The main component of a motorcycle is its engine. The first section of this video presentation will deal with engine types and their composition. But before discussing the actual makeup of each type of engine, let's go over the basic principle of operation of the internal combustion engine. A mixture of fuel and air is injected into the chamber of the cylinder above the piston and is compressed as the piston moves upwards. This makes the mixture very easy to burn. When it is ignited, it burns instantly and expands, increasing the pressure within the cylinder. The piston is then forced downward by the expanding gases created by the combustion. The force created by the downward motion of the piston is converted to a revolving movement by the crankshaft. The engine is thus a device which provides power from this revolving shaft. As you can see, the engine operates in cycles. Each cycle is composed of the compression of the fuel-air mixture after intake, the conversion of the force produced by gas expansion upon combustion. Each cycle is divided into 4 stages: intake, compression, expansion, and exhaust. Engines are designed in order to complete the different stages of each cycle without interruption. Many measures are taken so that the intake and exhaust will be executed smoothly. The motorcycle engine can be designed in 2 different ways, both of which complete the same cycle. There is the 2-stroke method and the 4-stroke method. First, let's begin by looking at the 2-stroke engine, its composition and its systems. During each cycle of piston movement, there is a time when the piston reaches its highest point in the cylinder. This is referred to as top dead center, or TDC. When it reaches its lowest position in the cylinder, it is said to be at bottom dead center, or BDC. The 2-stroke engine achieves 1 cycle with only 2 strokes of the piston. That is, there is only 1 revolution of the crankshaft. As you can see here, there are holes in the cylinder and crankcase chamber of the 2-stroke engine. These holes are called ports and are designed to allow intake, scavenging, and exhaust. Now, let's use this model of a reed valve engine in order to illustrate the basics of the completion of 1 cycle for the 2-stroke engine. In the 2-stroke engine, the upper chamber of the piston and the lower chamber of the crankcase perform 2 separate functions. Their differences are important. First, as the piston passes BDC, it begins to rise. The scavenger and exhaust ports are closed in succession and the mixture in the cylinder is compressed. At the same time, because the vacuum in the crankcase chamber is increased as the piston rises, the reed valve opens in response, and the mixture is taken in to the crankcase chamber. The mixture that was compressed as the piston rose is ignited by the spark plug just before TDC and burns instantly, creating gases that expand. The expanding gases create pressure that push the piston down hard, creating the driving force of the engine. As the piston descends, the vacuum in the crankcase chamber changes to pressure. The reed valve closes in response, and the crankcase chamber is sealed. As the piston falls further, the mixture in the crankcase chamber is compressed. This is referred to as primary compression and is a special characteristic of the 2-stroke engine. As the piston descends further, the exhaust port is opened as the piston head passes it, and the exhaust gases from the combustion are let out of the chamber. A little later, the scavenging port opens and the compressed mixture from the crankcase chamber is injected into the cylinder, also pushing out the exhaust gases. This process of bringing the mixture from the crankcase chamber up to the cylinder chamber is referred to as scavenging. In this way, the two-stroke engine completes one full cycle with 2 strokes of the piston, and power is obtained from every single revolution of the crankshaft. Mixture from the primary compression in the crankcase chamber is injected into the cylinder through the scavenger port, pushing out the exhaust gases. In order to achieve this effect as efficiently as possible, the position and angle of the scavenging port must be determined with extreme precision, taking into consideration how the engine will be used. The angles of revolution of the crankshaft, which the intake, exhaust and scavenging ports are opened and closed, are expressed in the port timing diagram. Note the positions of intake, primary compression, scavenging, compression, combustion and exhaust. As the piston moves on the upstroke, that is, as soon as the scavenging port in the upper cylinder chamber is closed by the head of the piston, a vacuum is created in the crankcase chamber and this causes mixture to be taken in. As the piston head rises further, it closes the exhaust port further up the wall of the cylinder and begins to compress the mixture in the cylinder. When the piston reaches TDC, the vacuum is no longer created in the crankcase chamber. The reed valve then closes and intake is completed. Note that the reed valve intake system requires special intake timing. The opening and closing of the reed valve is determined by the speed of the revolution of the engine and the inertia of the mixture taken in. When the piston is pushed down by combustion, the mixture in the crankcase chamber undergoes primary compression. As the piston descends further and the exhaust port in the upper chamber of the cylinder opens, exhaust gases are propelled through the port by virtue of their own expansion pressure. Then, as the piston head passes the scavenger port, opening it, the mixture of the primary compression in the crankcase chamber is injected into the upper cylinder chamber by the scavenging effect. The operation of the two-stroke engine is the continuous repetition of this cycle. The cycle of the two-stroke engine is completed in 2 strokes of the piston. The engine in which one cycle is completed in 4 strokes of the piston is referred to as the 4-stroke engine. The cylinder head of the 4-stroke engine has an inlet port and an outlet port. Each port is equipped with its own valve. These valves are operated by the camshaft, and they open and close the ports to effect intake and exhaust. This is the main characteristic of the 4-stroke engine. Let's begin with the explanation of the intake stroke. When the piston descends from TDC towards BDC, the inlet valve is opened and the exhaust valve remains closed. The descent of the piston lowers the pressure in the cylinder and the fuel-air mixture is taken into the cylinder. Next is the compression stroke. The inlet valve is closed before the piston reaches BDC and the cylinder chamber is sealed. The piston then rises and compresses the mixture in the cylinder. During the combustion stroke, the compressed mixture is ignited by the spark plug. Combustion creates expanding gases and the piston is pushed down by their force. This is the source of the engine's power. During this time as well, both valves remain closed. The exhaust stroke is last. The piston reaches BDC and begins to rise again. This time the exhaust valve opens and the exhaust gases are let out. The strokes, as seen in succession, are shown here. 4 strokes of the piston are required to complete one cycle, and drive power is provided once every 2 revolutions of the crankshaft. This graph expresses the changes in the internal pressure of the cylinder during each stroke of the cycle. During intake, a vacuum is created in the cylinder. During compression, pressure increases slowly. At ignition, just before TDC, pressure increases suddenly, pushing the piston down hard. Then, after combustion, the pressure falls suddenly and is reduced even further during the exhaust stroke. The valves of the 4-stroke engine make sure that mixture intake and post-combustion gas exhaust are effected with precision. The timing of their opening and closing is referred to as valve timing. If we take a closer look at an actual engine, we can see that valve timing is slightly different from the times when the piston reaches TDC and BDC. The valve timing is set in this way due to the inertia of the mixture and exhaust gases in order to improve engine efficiency. The 4-stroke valve timing diagram shows at which angle of rotation of the crankshaft the valves are opened and closed. It is similar to the port timing diagram used in the 2-stroke engine and demonstrates when intake, compression, combustion and exhaust occur. The intake valve usually opens just before TDC. This allows for intake mixture inertia, making it possible to take in larger amounts of mixture. The intake valve closes after BDC for the same reason. The valves remain closed for both the compression and combustion strokes. The exhaust valve begins to open before BDC of the combustion stroke. It opens early in order to be sure that all the unneeded exhaust gases are expelled from the cylinder. The exhaust valve shuts after passing TDC of the exhaust stroke. This is done in order to utilize the inertia of the exhaust gases to clear them out of the cylinder. The intake valve also opens around TDC of the exhaust stroke. Both valves being open at the same time is referred to as overlap. The mass of the mixture vapors let in at the end of the exhaust process aids in pushing out the exhaust gases still left in the cylinder. The early opening also allows more mixture to be taken into the cylinder. The camshaft is responsible for opening and closing the intake and exhaust valves. In order to assure the proper timing between the operation of the valves and the piston movements, it is necessary to adjust the timing of the crankshaft and the camshaft. The camshaft and crankshaft are connected by a chain that runs around sprockets on both shafts. The connection is designed so that the camshaft turns once for every 2 turns of the crankshaft. Whenever a 4-stroke engine is taken apart and reassembled, it is necessary to adjust the timing of the camshaft and crankshaft. That is to say, the valve timing. The operation of the valves differs according to the type of 4-stroke engine. Some engines utilize a rocker arm between the cam and the valve tappet, and others have the tappets rest directly on the valves themselves. In both cases, there is always a gap between the valve and the rocker arm, or cam and tappet. If there were no gap, the valves would not close completely during the compression and combustion strokes. There would be leakage of fuel-air mixture, and the power output of the engine would be reduced. This gap is referred to as the valve clearance. It is important to adjust it precisely. In this video, we have looked so far only at single-cylinder engines in order to illustrate the basic operation of the motorcycle engine as simply as possible. However, Suzuki motorcycles are not all designed with single-cylinder engines alone. There are also many models with multi-cylinder engines equipped with 2 or 4 cylinders. When engines with larger exhaust capacity and larger power output are designed, instead of increasing the capacity of a single cylinder, increasing the number of cylinders results in better performance, less vibration, and a more comfortable ride. However, this also increases the number of parts, making maintenance more complex. Whether the multi-cylinder engine is being designed for 2 or 4 cycle types, ignition timing and the balance of inertia forces between the pistons and the crankshaft are factors carefully considered for high performance and a comfortable ride. Let's use an actual 4-stroke, 4-cylinder engine to see how the balance is achieved. This is a Suzuki 4-cylinder engine that has been cut open. The cylinders are numbered from right to left in order: cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4. As you can see, when we turn the engine, cylinders 1 and 4 on the extreme right and left move up and down in the same position, as do cylinders 2 and 3 on the inside. Although their up and down movements are paired, each cylinder is actually in a different stage of its cycle. Engine movement is designed in this way so as to offset the inertia of the reciprocating parts. It also results in a balanced succession of ignition timing for each different cylinder, which improves the balance of the engine and reduces vibration. The ignition timing is thus set at every 180-degree turn of the crankshaft in 4-cylinder engines. This creates an overall balance between the inertia forces of the pistons and the centrifugal force of the crankshaft, and by making the firing order of cylinders 1, 2, 4, 3, the vibration of the engine is greatly reduced. In a 2-cylinder engine, where the cylinders have been placed at a 45-degree angle to each other, the engine's internal forces are balanced through the weighting of the crankshaft and the timing of the ignition for each cylinder. In other engine designs, such as the parallel twin or the single cylinder, a counterbalance shaft is used not only to balance the movement of the reciprocating parts, but also to counteract the horizontal inertia forces as well. If the engine is designed to take all these factors into consideration, it will run smoothly. This ends our explanation of the basic operating principles of the 2-stroke and 4-stroke engine.